situation of the phenomena, which is really a human phenomena, and everybody should be concerned about. What we're saying, there's a closer definition of what we are is free people, free Americans. As free Americans, we believe all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Free people, this more is a closer definition to what the phenomena is. We really don't know, like the Neolithic age is over and some new age is happening. What is it? We'll have to see. I don't know.
Whatever the hippies, or whatever they now call themselves, can purify their revolution merely by changing their name remains to be seen. But no one should blame them for trying. After all, it's their funeral. Richard Threlkeld, CBS News, San Francisco.
Well, Haight-Ashbury, people who want to make the scene for partying. Like when you're just tired of that stuff, when you just want to lead your life and just find what you just the ways you want to really lead your life internally and do the things you really want to do, then it's time to get out of the hassle, to get out into the country, to a place like this, where you can just plain live, just do whatever work you really want to do and just lead the kind of life you really want to lead.
This is the simple life, back to nature for these men and women. They grow much of their own food, carrots, potatoes, onions. In town at the supermarket, they buy the staples at discount prices because they're eligible for the federally supported food stamp program. Chickens always on Sunday. They say Rousseau would approve of the way they live here. The animals are a little scrawny, but after all, these hippies hadn't had much experience on the farm before they moved here. Most are from eastern cities and colleges. Drop City is being built out of old cars, found abandoned on the highways or bought at junkyards. They are chopped apart with axes. Hippies, paradoxically, liken this experience to Abe Lincoln's rail splitting in Illinois. Each car makes a steel panel for the dome, strong enough to withstand the cold wind and snow of the winter in the Rockies, and ingenious enough to have received the critical acclaim of architects. Hippie Ed Hunt.
'Cause it's home, the only life I ever known, yeah. And the Lord knows I roam. 'Cause it's home, the only life I ever known, yeah. And the Lord knows I roam. 'Cause it's home, the only life I ever known, yeah. And the Lord knows I roam. 'Cause it's home, the only life I ever known, yeah. And the Lord knows I roam. 'Cause it's home, the only life I ever known, yeah. And the Lord knows I roam. 'Cause it's home, the only life I ever known, yeah. And the Lord knows I roam. 'Cause it's home, the only life I ever known, yeah. And the Lord knows I roam. 'Cause it's home.
Whatever happened to the hippies? The hippies of Haight-Ashbury, the San Francisco community that flourished as the world capital of the hippie movement back in the 60s. Well, that's been the subject of a research project conducted on the scene by a team of social scientists. That's a little bit like looking for traces of a lost civilization, but not quite.
Haight and Ashbury are two streets in San Francisco. And the hippies who hung out here 10 years ago epitomized the rejection of just about all forms of authority and discipline, religion and family, school and job. They lived on simple fare and simple feeling, hard rock and drugs. They were mostly white, middle class, and came from city and suburban backgrounds. Not far from Haight-Ashbury, we found a man who had been part of the hippie scene. We asked him when it all ended.
Well, for me, it ended the day I was walking down Haight Street and I saw a teenage girl eating a can of dog food in front of the psychedelic shop.
Today, this neighborhood is not unlike those in other parts of the country. Could be a college town or medium-sized city anywhere. It's a lovely place. Slow, easy pace. No longer do barefoot children choke the sidewalks. Gone are the gawkers and the tourist buses and the calculated outrageousness that drew them. But between 1966 and 1970, 100,000, perhaps as many as 200,000 young people from all over the country were attracted here. What's happened to them? Where have they gone?
In 1967, in this storefront office in Haight-Ashbury, Dr. Stephen Patel and other social scientists began their long-term study of the hippies. We asked Dr. Patel, who is now a psychologist at the Wright Institute in Berkeley, why the hippies were worth studying.
Well, at the time that we began our study, we received funding from the National Institute of Mental Health. And they were, I think, very legitimately concerned with the hippies and very embarrassed by their failure to understand why such a privileged, elite group of youngsters would drop out. It seemed to fly in the face of everything that we knew or could expect about this group of youngsters who were really seen as the children of the American dream.
Some children of the American dream entered a long nightmare that is yet to end. His name is Jimmy. His mother asked us not to show his face. 9 years ago, when he was 16, CBS News interviewed Jimmy. He talked about his experiences with LSD.
It makes everything a little unreal, you know, everything that is hallucinations project from my mind. And everything that I see is myself. I mean, it's all coming from my mind, and all the things that I see, everything that I see I'm making it all.
Today, Jimmy is 25, and according to his mother, is a paranoid schizophrenic. We filmed him on Haight Street. He lives nearby at a halfway house for mental patients. It would not be accurate, however, to infer that everyone who took LSD in Haight-Ashbury ended up a mental patient.
Across the entire sample that we studied, there's a marked reduction in the use of all drugs, including the mainstays of the hippie movement, LSD and the other psychedelic drugs. Looking at all of them as a group, they are considerably straighter now than they were then. In terms of all of the things that first attracted our attention to the hippies, their outrageous and often bizarre personal appearance and dress, their use of drugs, their relationships with their family, their attitudes and sexual behavior, in all of these regards, they're much more like the average American adolescent or young adult today than they were then.
Have most of them gone straight?
I think that the best term to describe what's happened to them is that they're no longer dropouts, but they've dropped down. That they've dropped down to a marginal level of participation in the mainstream of society.
On a percentage basis, what has happened to them?
Well, we broke them up into three groups. About 40% of them fell into a group that we call the re-entry group. These are the ones who have returned most to conventional society.
Sandy Webster is a re-entry by Dr. Patel's definition. When she lived in the Haight, she told us, she didn't accomplish much except listening to music and getting stoned every day. Sandy is now 29. She lives in Orlando, Florida, where she is employed as a social worker for the state of Florida. Separated from her husband, she is trying to be a good parent to her 5-year-old daughter. We joined them on a Sunday outing at the zoo and asked her how she had changed.
Well, I'm working steady, and my hair is shorter, and I have regained a sense of direction, and that I think it's the important thing is that you don't despair about all the things that are wrong with the world, and in a way, that's what we did. You know, we just felt there was no hope for the establishment at all. You know, there were so many things wrong. Well, we were right about all the things that were wrong, but we weren't right about what to do about it. We were very idealistic, and we thought the power of this notion that we had, you know, the world was just going to change. We were going to love everybody, and people were just going to see that. it didn't happen, and we were young. And when you're young, you don't have a whole lot of patience with allowing for a few hundred years for social change to take place.
What was wrong with where you came from? What did you want to leave?
What it basically comes down to is that I was looking for somebody to love me, because I don't think I ever really felt that anybody really loved me.
Did you find that there?
Yes.
For example, a majority of them are involved in school at least part-time, or are working at least part-time. Many of them have reestablished at least cordial relationships with their parents. They're much less transient. In other ways also, they show greater stability. They tend now to be in monogamous relationships. Many of them have children, and they're very committed to values of hearth and home.
Jack Wolf is representative of another group in Dr. Patel's study, the 40% who are classified as semi-reentries. Jack lives on a 1,000-acre commune in southern Tennessee known as The Farm. The Farm began when Stephen Gaskin, who was regarded as a moral and religious teacher in Haight-Ashbury, led 250 of his disciples to Tennessee in 1969. Today, there are 800 people living here. The Farm is not a crash pad. Not everyone who arrives is allowed to stay. The Farm residents work hard. They have to in order to raise enough to feed 800 people a nutritious vegetarian diet. The do-your-own-thing philosophy is out, and people here live in a tight structure based on Gaskin's teachings. They publish and distribute those teachings along with books on midwifery and vegetarianism. Back when Jack Wolf lived in Haight-Ashbury, he spent much of his time playing the flute in the park. On the farm, Jack's job is to help keep 75 vehicles in working order. Although it may not be your average 9-to-5 job, Jack is not spending his days playing the flute. Looking back on it, are you sorry that you didn't finish college?
What I'm really sorry about, the only thing I'm really sorry about was that I didn't take auto mechanics in high school, because I'm having to learn the fundamentals now.
We asked Jack why he went to Haight-Ashbury in the first place.
I wanted to step out as far as I could.
Do you think you stepped out as far as you could?
Yeah, I step out a little too far sometimes, you know.
Sometimes still?
No, I've gotten, you know, I think I've gotten on top of that some. Yeah, I don't, you know, at that time I'd do almost anything for the experience of doing it.
Give me an example of that, something that you did that you think was too far out.
Once I went around knocking on doors telling people I was Elijah the prophet.
For what purpose?
Dramatic effect.
Did it have that effect?
Yeah, well, a couple of people came on to me with shotguns. It got pretty dramatic.
You say you're into God.
Mm-hmm.
Into family, the concept of family?
Yeah.
In a traditional sense?
Yeah.
Are you into country?
You know, I love the country like I love my family, but, you know, I don't feel any, that any one man is worth any more than another man just because he happens to be an American, you know.
Haight-Ashbury, to a lot of people, to literally millions of people, meant anti-God, anti-family, anti-country.
Yeah, well, I don't, you know, you probably know better than I do about, you know, what the country actually thought was going on. I was right in the middle of it, you know. Some people would throw beer cans at me, and some people would ask if they could take my picture.
Well, we were right about the system. You know, we were right about the FBI and the CIA. We weren't at all paranoid. I think we were right to believe that there are a lot of things in life that are more important than how much money you make, and that it's not a very good idea to judge people solely on how they look, or to make too many, you know, jump to too many conclusions at all about them based on their appearance.
In societal terms, were the hippies a prophetic minority?
In many ways, I think yes. It's hard to know whether prophecy is the correct word or whether it's more correct to talk about the major society co-opting many of the values and beliefs of the hippie movement. Certainly, aspects of the art forms that they innovated, aspects of their lifestyle and attitudes and values and beliefs have now become normal in the mainstream of society.
For example?
Well, for example, long hair and rock music and the widespread and increasing use of marijuana, and attitudes about sexual freedom and women's liberation. These are all things which had roots, if not origins, in the hippie movement.
Dr. Patel told us that roughly 40% of his subjects were re-entries, like Sandy Webster in Florida. Another 40% were semi-re-entries, like Jack Wolf on the farm in Tennessee. The remaining 20% were non-re-entries, those who were still heavily committed to drugs, or for a few, like Jimmy, lost to psychosis. Patel also says that on the whole, the group he studied became more conventional in appearance and behavior. But, and this may be the most important thing, they retain most of the basic attitudes they developed in the heyday of Haight-Ashbury. They remain cynical about the system, for example, stay skeptical about the benefits of technology and capitalism, and resist getting into the mainstream of American life. Did we find any ex-hippies who became bankers in Boston? The answer is no, though there may be a few. But if Dr. Patel's data is reliable, there won't be many, now or in the future.
20 years ago this week, on a muddy field in upstate New York, a gathering of 350,000 young people gave a name to a generation. The name was Woodstock. And if you believe that Woodstock is only a matter for nostalgia buffs these days, we'll just watch the next report. It comes from David Browning.
What's wrong with this picture? It's a fair question this summer of '89. If tie-dyed T-shirts, hippies, and music from the Woodstock era are ancient history, why have 100,000 young people jammed into New Jersey's Meadowlands? They are here to see the Grateful Dead, one of the bands that played Woodstock. The Dead are living proof that you don't have to be young to rock and roll.
If somebody's good at something, there's no reason they should stop doing it, you know? It's not as though there was some mandatory retirement age.
Matter of fact, you might call this the summer of the rock and roll geezer. The Doobie Brothers are together again on tour, minus a little hair plus a few pounds. Ringo Starr, 49, has hit the road with an all-star band. Paul McCartney, 47, is doing the same. Roger Daltrey, 45, and The Who are packing them in. And the original middle-aged bad boys of rock, the Rolling Stones, are about to hit the States once more.
To the best live rock and roll band in the world.
Talk about ironies. 20 years ago, the Jefferson Airplane liked to joke that if they ever hit middle age, they'd call themselves the Jefferson Wheelchair. Now, they're gearing up to tour.
What's that old line about, if I'd have known I was going to last this long, I would have taken better care of myself? I know quite a few rock and roll stars that I think would agree with that saying now.
And it's not just aging yuppies who turn out for The Who and the rest. There are kids standing online to see musicians old enough to be their fathers.
My generation. They're part of rock and roll history, is what I can say.
Mackenzie Phillips ought to know. Her Papa John is a rocker who still tours, who's amazed how kids of the 80s have picked up on old rock and roll from their mamas and papas.
It's like a form of musical child abuse or something, you know? I mean, their parents keep playing the records over and over again.
And so do classic rock stations, the hot radio format around the country these days.
This is 95.5 KLOS, some Beatles right there.
Advertisers love it because of all those affluent 30 and 40-something listeners.
And we're giving away the last Who tickets in town.
All aboard! Oh, this is nice.
But for bands like the Rolling Stones, hitting the road one more time involves more than just satisfaction. By one estimate, this year's tours by the Stones, The Who, and Paul McCartney could rake in a total of $300 million in tickets, TV rights, and T-shirts.
$35 shirts.
The Stones were even asked the impertinent question, are you doing it just for the money?
No, that's The Who. Who said that? Who said that?
One thing is for sure, in their 40s, even rock and rollers can't live it up the way they did 25 years ago. Ringo has quit drinking.
I was in a mess and I sought help and I got it and I feel a lot better for it. I'm just sorry.
Welcome back, man.
Thank you. I'm just sorry I waited so long, really.
And Peter Townsend of The Who is trying to be nicer to his ears, which are shot from too many decibels over the years.
So I've decided that I'm going to play a different style of guitar. I'm going to play a bit like John Denver.
Let's have it all.
A strange bus, the likes of which has not been seen in many a year, has been spotted roaming the roadways of the West Coast. Residents say it's like some ghost ship from days gone by. Either that, or the president of Greyhound has totally flipped out.
Hi, cows.
In 1964, Ken Kesey and his band of merry pranksters made a legendary cross-country trip. Now, a quarter of a century later, Ken Kesey's back on the magic bus.
Up to the light and turn left. Up to the light and turn left. And up to the light and turn right. Go up to the light and turn left. Why does it say right turn only then?
You have left on green. Some say the 60s really started with parties at Ken Kesey's house in Palo Alto, where LSD was served. In fact, Kesey was bringing the LSD home from a CIA-sponsored testing program, where he was paid to take it.
$20 a day. You went in at 8 o'clock, they gave you one thing or another. I took psilocybin, mescaline, LSD, IT-290.
At age 25, Kesey wrote One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, a bestseller which became a film that won the Academy Award for Best Picture. He wrote a second bestseller, Sometimes a Great Notion, and got on the bus, setting out for New York and taking lots of home movies along the way. The driver, Neil Cassidy, was already legendary, the model for the hero of Jack Kerouac's novel, On the Road. Author Tom Wolfe chronicled the growth of the counterculture around Kesey's parties, where his famous Electric Kool-Aid was served and the Grateful Dead was the house band. Attitudes changed. After spending 6 months in jail on marijuana charges, Kesey retreated to Pleasant Hill, Oregon. He has been called the psychedelic conservative for his traditional lifestyle. He is a farmer, has been married for 36 years, and has a grandchild.
I've always been, far more conservative than Barry Goldwater can imagine, because I still believe in all that stuff. I haven't ever developed any kind of cynicism about the American dream.
The reincarnation of the bus came about with the publication last month of a book by Kesey about the original bus trip. This is the original bus, which the Smithsonian Institute would like to have.
As you see, it's become very organic. Where the hole is in the roof, there's quite a lot of grass growing back there.
This is today's replica.
Time to roll, the weather's saying go.
Some of the original pranksters were aboard for the reunion voyage. Ken Babbs, Mike Hagan, and Roy Seaburn, along with a whole new generation of pranksters, including Kesey's son, Zane. Kesey's nephew, Kit, was at the wheel. They set off 3 weeks ago on their bizarre journey, stopping first to campaign for Wavy Gravy, another 60s legend who was running for Berkeley City Council. he lost. They happened upon a sorority pledge class at Stanford. As always, the pranksters made quite an impression.
Wow. Wow.
Okay, would you like a little brief tour here? It starts back here in the primordial ooze, when everything is dark and filmy and fishes are
Although
working on it.
pranksters were never ones to sermonize, on this trip, Kesey was offering up some 60s themes he feels have been salted away for too long.
Lead you into the laid-back Egyptian. This word here is the word for enlightenment.
So you don't think the revolution is dead, huh?
Oh, Lord, no.
Corpses.
No, the revolution started when the first caveman handed a guy a bone to chew on instead of hitting him in the head. The first act of mercy and trust. And all the other cavemen said, what are you handing the bone for? And years later, you know why you hand him the bone. Because you want him as a friend, and you don't want him starving. And you don't want homeless people.
Where Kesey's bus will stop, nobody knows. One day at the San Jose Egyptian Museum. The next in Berkeley to read from his new children's book.
And I don't mean lunchtime, snack time, little I'm hungry.
The day after at a San Francisco book fair.
The biggest reaction that we get is not from fans. It's from 12-year-olds on skateboards. Everybody keeps asking deep questions about it. There's nothing deep to it. You know, it's like a kite or fireworks or a sunset or a tree in the fall. It goes by, it goes boom, and everybody sees it and their face goes boom on the bus, and you smile and they smile, and that's it.
Put your headsets on, you're about to sing.
Outside, Kesey said it's time for pacifists to get involved in what he sees as a war for the environment.
It's not the peace symbol. Anybody know what it is? Victory. It's not peace. Hell with peace. It's time for victory. We've been peaceful for 20 years. And I enjoy being a famous writer. The trouble is, every so often I have to write something.
He has not written a full novel since 1964. He is working on an epic novel about Alaska. His will not be a novel about feelings and relationships.
It's dull to me. Give me some animals and some machines and stuff that is a little unpredictable. Let's get out of this soap opera consciousness. I want to get back into outer space and in the woods and back where Poe is. You know, when you're reading Edgar Allan Poe or Huckleberry Finn, they're out into the world having an adventure. Does life have a theme? My own life have a theme, yep.
Kesey answered with lyrics by the Grateful Dead.
Sometimes the light's all shining on me. Other times I can barely see. Lately it occurs to me what a long, strange trip it's been.
And with that, the spirit of the 60s was gone again, last seen vanishing into the hills of Oregon.